One of the commitments when I was interviewing for this job that I made to the elders was that my style is to be fairly prepared and to work ahead quite a bit so that the pulpit is not always tossed to and fro by current events. And yet there are times when not saying something is just unpastoral. And so give me a moment here to just address that many of us come to church this morning with a somber heart, with a heavy heart. Many of us were here yesterday to celebrate the life of Megan Drakowski. Many of us are here today with heavy hearts because a friend has left this world far, far too soon. And then we see an event that will shape us, that will inevitably have consequences, an act of violence. And I was happy to see that many commentators came out quickly, and other politicians came out extremely quickly saying, we condemn political violence, no matter who, no matter what, no matter when. And I think what the church would come and say, though that is a good thing to say, what the church would come and critique is you can take the word political out of that sentence and it still works. We condemn violence. That the church is for God's mission of love in the world, and God's mission is for a kingdom of peace. And violence is an ineffective tool for peace. And so, what does the church bring in the absence of violence? Because the world is going to want to know, okay, great, what are you fighting violence with? And I think what 1 Peter would say to us this morning is what we bring is hope. Hope might seem like a flimsy word for the kind of violence that we experience. Hope might seem like a flimsy word for the kind of loss and grief we walk through. But I think 1 Peter would ask us this morning to look again at what hope can do. Look again. 1 Peter is full of words of apocalypse, and that is a very misunderstood word. Apocalypse does not mean the end of the world and violence and fire raining down from the skies. Apocalypse means literally the unveiling, the revealing. This is why the apocalypse is sometimes called revelation. It is the revealing of what's actually real. Because what seems real is veiled. And it needs to be revealed. And so 1 Peter would say to us this morning, look again. I think that's what he says to his original audience. Look again. Look again, see if there isn't hope. One of the challenges of reading 1 Peter is understanding who the original audience is. It's what we call a general letter. It is not written to a specific church for a specific occasion. It is written to, as we talked about last week, the exiles of dispersion in 4 different northern provinces of what is modern-day Turkey. And so you wouldn't expect something very, very specific because maybe what the Christians in Pontus are going through is very different from what the Christians in Bithynia are going through. But we can piece together some pretty good information. Like I said, Peter calls them the exiles of dispersion, which is a term of honor that was used for the people who refused to give up God way back when Israel was first thrown into exile, way, way before Jesus ever came. And so now Peter uses this term for these Christians who are themselves flung out into a hostile world, fighting against unbelief all around them. But unlike the first people that are called the exiles of dispersion, these Christians are probably not Jewish. They're probably almost exclusively Gentile. When we look at the book as a whole, we can learn quite a bit about these people. We know from verse 14 that they're almost certainly Gentiles. When Paul says that they've been freed from their former ignorances, what he means is this is a code for the time when they were ignorant about the Hebrew God. They've been freed from that former ignorance. They're almost certainly Gentiles. Even though they are exiles, Peter calls them in verse 2, God's chosen. They are the people who God has thought from the foundation of the world are the perfect people to be the neighbors of their neighbors right then and there. They are chosen for this time, for this role in God's kingdom. We know in chapter 2 that they are probably baptized Christians. They're probably brand new baptized believers, baptized Gentiles. And so if there is an occasion for the letter, Peter is writing to the brand new baby Christians in what is modern day northern Turkey, who are chosen for this time and yet facing all sorts of challenges. Chapter 2 also probably tells us there's probably a large amount of slaves in their churches. Chapter 3 tells us there's probably a large amount of women in their churches. Two groups of people who did not have a lot of autonomy over their own lives in the first century. These are the people that populate the churches to whom Peter writes. And so I wonder if we can use our imaginations this morning to conceive of a story that is not really there, but a story that is maybe likely, if we can empathize with these first receivers of this letter. So it's the year 63. It's about 30 years after Jesus has died at the hands of the Roman governor Pilate at the behest of the Jewish Sanhedrin. And in the year 63, an 18-year-old woman that we will call Donna has been betrothed to a man much older than her since she was 13. And Donna has come of age now. She is 18, and it is time for her to move into the household of her husband, and they are wed, and they are just trying to live their best Roman lives. Her husband, Marcus, is really an up-and-coming guy. He's 28 years old. He's from a good family. He served in the Roman military when he was younger, and he's a landowner. Marcus is really the very model of a modern major Roman. When he isn't supervising his estates and the people that are enslaved on those estates, he is in the town center listening to the sophists argue against the Platonists and the world's great philosophy taking place. He goes and listens to the Senate when it is in session. He exercises at the gymnasium. And he, when time permits, travels the 10-mile journey south to a town called Pergamon, where he goes and pays tributes to all of the gods there at the Acropolis. For the first year of marriage, Donna goes everywhere Marcus allows her to go, everywhere he permits her to go. She, too, is a good Roman. And so she dives deeply into the cultural religion of her people. She makes her parents so proud with the way that she honors the gods. And Marcus's family god, Apollo, who has an altar at the very center of their family estate, she goes whenever she can and brings food and flowers and money and honors her husband's God because she is a good traditional wife full of faith. Well, after a year, the day after Marcus leaves for an extended business trip, Donna wakes up and she feels nauseous. And she realizes amidst her discomfort that she is pregnant. And she is so full of joy because though she has already made her husband so happy, and he is so pleased with her and the way that she is a good girl, she is now going to fulfill her true role as a Roman wife. She is going to go give her husband, hopefully, a son. And so she runs to the altar there in the middle of the family estate to Apollo, and she brings money and flowers and food. And she, full of faith, says to Apollo, please, let it be a son. I want to make Marcus so happy. For several days, everything is just perfect, but one morning she wakes up with a great pain in her stomach, and she becomes really nervous. And soon she begins bleeding, and she panics because she knows, even though this will be so sad if she loses this baby, that there is an even greater danger for her to lose a baby. Because while Roman men do not need a reason to divorce their wives, this is often one of the most frequent reasons given. If the wife cannot provide the husband with a son, he has every right to dismiss her from the family, and she is on her own. And so amidst her pain and her sadness, as she begins to lose her pregnancy, she falls into a corner and has a panic attack, and she cries and she weeps. She's also very scared because the house is full of servants. And if just one of them finds out, she does not know what will happen. And at that moment, she hears a voice behind her say, are you okay? And she turns around and sees a young enslaved girl, and she snaps at her, who are you to talk to me like that? There's something in this young girl's face that scares her and snaps her out of it. And she realizes this person is just trying to be nice, just trying to be kind to me. And she tells her what happens. And this young girl helps her clean up and hide the evidence and promises not to tell anyone until she can come up with a plan. The next day, Dawn is hiding in her room when the same young girl walks in and says, are you okay? And Donna says to her, what is your name? She asks, why don't we ever see you at night when the whole family gathers, when everyone who works here gathers and pays tribute to Apollo? Why don't we ever see you there? And the young girl says, my name is Sevra. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in the gods. Your husband bought me when I was 6 years old, and my village was destroyed in the Republican Wars. And I don't come and worship Apollo because I'm an atheist. Donna gasps because Sevra has just committed blasphemy in her presence. You do not speak against the gods. And there she just openly did it. She said, what do you mean you don't believe in the gods? Is this why you're so awkward and antisocial all the time? She says, it's not that I don't believe in any gods. I fear the Hebrew God. Before I was born, my family converted to being fearers of the Hebrew God. And before long, we were even kicked out of the synagogues because we refused to denounce the man Jesus, who is said to be the son of the Hebrew God. And Donna screams, there is only one Son of God, and that is Caesar. You better be glad that Marcus is not home to hear you say that. He could have you killed on the spot. Sevra says, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you asked. And so I'm telling you, I believe that the one true God is the Hebrew God, and that the man Jesus was his son. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I won't bother you anymore with this. And Donna thinks, well, I should just go tell on her, just say right now what she has said. But she realizes that this young girl holds her secret, holds her life in her hands. So she sits with the information. Another day passes and she sees Sevra again, and she realizes the kindness that this person is showing her. She realizes how Sevra is taking great risk herself to be kind, to show her love. And she asks, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And Sevra says, Let me show you. Come look at why I'm doing this. She takes her with her to the poorer part of the city. And there, in this small, cramped household, other slaves, other women who are married to noble men but are hiding their identities, meet around a table. And they confess that there is another person at this table that they can't see. The man Jesus himself is there. And his presence is manifested in the bread and the wine, and that he is the host of that table. And that because of this table, there is a place for them not only here in a city where non-men and non-free people don't have freedom, but there is a place for them one day in the kingdom of God. And Donna is entranced by this hope, this ridiculous belief that the gods aren't real, and that a man who has been killed lives. And in the midst of her grief, hope breaks through, and you can see where this is going. Donna is baptized. Donna puts on Christ, and she begins to keep yet another secret from her husband. Well, the very next day, Marcus returns, and he hopes to see his wife's belly grown and her more pregnant. And instead, before he sees her, another servant says to him, "Not only has your wife lost your child, but she is converted. She has denounced the gods. She has slandered your name by doing so." And he calls Donna and Severa to him, and he says, "I could have you both killed for this, but I will be a compassionate person." And he throws Donna out. And before he throws Severa out, he has her beaten. And the two women travel together to the poorer parts of the city. And they find the home where the church meets. And they learn that a letter has just recently arrived. A letter has just recently arrived specifically for those Christians like Donna who have just put on Christ in baptism. And it begins this way. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen and destined by God the Father and sanctified by the Spirit to be obedient to Jesus Christ and to be sprinkled with his blood. May grace and peace be yours in abundance. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. By his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who are being protected by the splendor of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. And we might ask on Donna's behalf, an inheritance? Donna has recently lost anything, any possession now or later. An inheritance unfading, unblemished, imperishable? We don't see it. We would forgive Donna for being skeptical and for having questions. We would forgive her for saying, if I'm God's chosen, why isn't God making things easier for me? Why have I lost so much so quickly? We would forgive her for asking these questions, but one of the problems with these questions is that they are uniquely ours. It is a recent thing for the people of God to ask such rationalistic, logical questions. It is a recent thing for us to believe that if something isn't going our way, God must be at the heart of it. It is what we call the prosperity gospel. And if you've heard of the prosperity gospel, that might be shocking to think that a question like, why do bad things happen to good people, is at the heart of the prosperity gospel, but it really is. A woman named Kate Bowler is a theological historian at Duke Divinity School. It's a pretty cool job. And she has studied the prosperity gospel for years. And she teaches that we typically think of celebrity pastors with $5,000 suits and wavy hairs and neon white smile. That's what we kind of think about when we think about the prosperity gospel. But at the heart of the prosperity gospel is the belief that if my faith is right, God will make me prosper. If my faith is right, God will make me prosper. If I'm good, God will be good to me, which implies that God's goodness is based on my goodness. And if bad things happen to me, it must be because I'm not being faithful enough. And I want you to believe me when I tell you that this is a recent heresy. In fact, I don't know if it's something to be proud of, but it is the one and only heresy that has begun in North America. Okay, it's not a good thing. And only in the very recent history have Christians been able to believe in this, but just because it's recent doesn't mean it's not very, very dangerous. Buller says this, if you can throw the quote up there. Rather than worshiping the founding of America itself, the prosperity gospel worships Americans. It deifies and ritualizes their hungers, their hard work, and moral fiber. Americans believe in the gospel of optimism, and they are their own proof. It's hard for me not to believe this. I'll be honest, it's hard for me not to believe in this version of the prosperity gospel. I have, as she says, deified my own hard work. I believe that if I've worked hard for something, and by the way, I always believe that I've worked hard for it. If I've worked hard for something and it's not given to me, that it must be God's problem. And this is dangerous. The prosperity gospel is not just the celebrity pastors with $5,000 suits. Most of us are like you and me when we believe in the kind of prosperity gospel that we catch ourselves saying things like, but I'm good. But I've been a good person. Why is this happening? We are the kind of people who would come to this text and say to Peter, how can you talk about anything being imperishable, unfading, lasting forever, because everything we know falls apart. Everything in our experience fades, deteriorates, breaks down over time. Peter, what are you talking about? And is it just for when we die? Because that's not quite what we need right now. The prosperity gospel has very little room for what Peter is talking about at the beginning of this letter. These are people for whom being a Roman has not been great. They're slaves and women, and if any one of them has been lucky enough to be born with a rich parent, they have almost certainly lost their inheritance the moment that they confess Christ. So these people, if they thought like us, might be saying, what inheritance is God protecting for us? The prosperity gospel wants to scream at Peter, how can you talk about such things? And I think to those questions, to us this morning, Peter says, look again. Is there anything else there? The tragedy of Kate Bowler's life is that as she's studying the prosperity gospel, as she's landing a dream job for a 35-year-old to be a tenured professor at Duke Divinity School, newly married, with a healthy, happy young child, she gets a call one day and is told that she's just been diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. She's 35 years old. And she says that as I walked into the hospital for my first treatment, for my first visit, I realized that I had my own version of the prosperity gospel. That I was thinking to myself, this isn't fair. Everything is starting to happen for me. Why is this happening now? And she wrote a book that is appropriately titled, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I Used to Love. Everything happens for a reason and other lies I used to love. If you, like me, find yourself asking questions like, why do good things happen to good people, bad things happen to good people, this is a pretty good read. Bowler says that really well-meaning people would come to her in the hospital and say things like, God has a greater plan for this, to which one day her husband said, I'd like to hear it. People would ask her, can't you see how God is going to use this for your good? To which she said, no, before was better. Before was better. If I had to choose between having cancer and not having cancer, I choose the life where I didn't have cancer. But Bowler says something else happened. She kept looking. And there in those hospital rooms by herself, when everything was stripped away, she noticed love. She noticed that she possessed a love for the nurses that would come in and out of her room, whose names she didn't even know. But she felt a profound love for them. She felt an even deeper love for her husband, not because he stayed by her side, not because he did all the right things, not because he advocated for her, but because he was. And her love for her son grew. Her love for the people that she studied with whom she greatly disagreed grew. She became so enamored with this love, so in love with this love, that she became nervous. And she went to a spiritual advisor who had had similar experience, and she said, I'm afraid it's going to leave. What a fascinating thing. What a fascinating thing in the midst of cancer diagnosis, in the midst of chemotherapy and experimental treatment, to say, I'm afraid mostly that this feeling of love will leave me. And the spiritual advisor said to her, it will. One day the feeling will fade, but it leaves an imprint that never leaves you. So I think that we might just hear 1 Peter say to us, there is going to be a revelation. There's going to be an apocalypse, a great unveiling of true reality. And this isn't it. Look again. When everything is stripped from you in a moment, look again. When a friend or a loved one leaves far too soon, when violence rules our world, look again. God is protecting something for us that nothing can take away. It's hard to see now, but one day it will be clear. We have things that no one can take from us. When you're sitting in the hospital, can you see an inheritance there? I'm not asking us to be optimistic. I'm asking us to see if we can't see hope. I'm not asking us to have the power of positive thinking to wish away all bad things. No. Hope doesn't do that. Hope sits in the hospital room, sits with us as we sit with a loved one, and it says, is there anything else there? When a loving mother and wife and friend passes away far too young, are we aware that love hasn't left us? In the midst of great sufferings, Christians rejoice. Blessed be God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. We rejoice from the center of who we are because we know that God has an inheritance for us that no one can get to. God has prepared a place specifically for us. And there, in the middle of that protected place, are the remnants, the vestiges, the imprints of things that we have felt and experienced here in this world. Hope love, joy. The last things are going to be the best things. But the thing about an inheritance is it doesn't just change our future. An inheritance doesn't just change us the day we get it. Somebody who knows that they are about to inherit something plans accordingly. It leaves an imprint. It's there even when it's not really there. And so those of us who believe and hope that the best things will be the last things, we live as though they're already ours, and that no one can take those things away from us. Hope is not optimism. It is not the power of positive thinking. Hope changes us. And it changes those who we bump into. Sevra changes Donna because she's hopeful. She's willing to take a risk because of hope. Hope changes things. And so we have joy in the midst of suffering, a peace that passes all understanding, and a living hope both now and forever. God is protecting those things for us, and one day they will be ours. Church, until then, our job is to be the priests of this world, to change it by giving people hope. We're going to need to hang on to hope. It's going to be the central theme of this book, hope till the end. It's going to change us, and it's going to change the world, but first it has to change us. As we walk through this together, let's be watching and looking, not for the silver lining, not for the way that something good might come out of something horrible, but looking again for the ways that love, joy, and a living hope are always here for us. Would you stand and receive this blessing? May the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ go with you this week wherever he may send you. May he guide you into the wilderness. May he protect you in the storm. May he bring you home rejoicing at all the wonders he has shown you. May he bring you home rejoicing once again to these doors.